Vikram Singh Mehta is Executive Chairman of the think tank Brookings India and Senior Fellow Brookings Institution USA. He was the chairman of the Shell Group of companies in India between 1994 and 2012, and prior to that, Chief Executive of Shell Markets and Shell Chemicals at Egypt between 92 and 93. Vikram started his career with the Indian Civil Service, 1978 to 80, and was advisor strategic planning to the state-owned company Oil India between 84 and 19. Vikram Singh Mehta is an independent director of several companies, including Thomson Reuters Founder Share Company, Larsen & Toubro Limited, Mahindra & Mahindra Limited, Colgate-Palmolive India Limited, and Apollo Tyres. He is also on the board of overseers of the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy, Tufts University, and on the Global Advisory Board of Macro Advisory Partners. Vikram Singh Mehta was recipient of Asia House's Businessman of the Year Award in 2010. He also received Asia Center for Corporate Governance and Sustainability Award for the Best Independent Director in India as recently as 2016. Shri Vikram Singh Mehta, sir, it's an honor to invite you to say a few words on the subject of this session, which is Corporates for Change, CSR, Competitiveness. Shri Mehta.
Thank you very much for that introduction. Partha, the President of Bombay Chamber and Commerce, other distinguished guests on the panel, thank you very much for inviting me today to deliver this talk. I'm not sure that I can thank you for taking away everything I needed to say. Every single speaker that's preceded me has addressed all of the points that I had in mind. So as I was listening to first Partha and then Madam Musika, I was rethinking my entire talk. And so what you're going to hear now is not a keynote address by any stretch of imagination. It's going to be a series of questions that I want to pose to myself, but I pose it I pose it in a way that perhaps can trigger some thoughts in your own mind and possibly lead to further deliberation in your conclave. Four thoughts sort of came to my mind as I listened to what the previous speakers had said. One is, do we really believe as businessmen in our social obligation? Do we believe that we have a duty towards society? Or do we think that this is a price that we have to pay in order to retain our operating license? Is it a price that we have to pay in order to uphold our public reputation? I just posed that question. I'll come back to what I think are the answers. The second question that came to mind is, today's conversation or today's topic is on sustainability as an imperative towards competition. But we use the word CSR and sustainability interchangeably. We talk of CSR and we talk of sustainability as if they're the same, if they have the same meaning. I'm not sure that that is correct. I think there is a need for conceptual clarity here if we wish to indeed progress effectively towards creating sustainability as a tool for managing our competitive or meeting our competitive threats. So I'll come back to that as well. The third question is on the issue of collaboration. I think the examples that Sheetal gave today of Mahindra are brilliant examples of sustainable collaboration. But there are many examples that we can think about where we talk of collaboration, but we in effect really talk about collaborating as financial partners. And my question to myself and to you is, what do we really want when we talk of collaboration in order to achieve a sustainable future. Collaboration has to be along different dimensions if we are going to achieve the goal of sustainability. So, and the final question is, how do we measure impact? We talk about impact as the ultimate objective. And my real question is, do we really understand what we mean by impact? So let me just put that as the forward to my talk. But let me just start by saying that this topic that you have identified for this conclave, I think is timely, it's important, and I congratulate you for having actually focused on this subject today, especially at a time when business is facing extraordinary pressures. All of us in the room today, all of you, I'm not a businessman anymore, but all of you who are businessmen go out of this room and wonder whether you're going to be able to meet your sales targets or whatever targets you have. Because the business community, whether it's in India, whether it's globally, is under extraordinary pressure. The business norms have completely changed. Technology has been disruptive, but not just technology. Politics is disruptive. Economics is disruptive. Social issues have become disruptive. The entire capitalist model is under threat. Today, we have the resurgence of political populism that has led to protectionist trade policies. There's a potential crisis between US and China. That's just global. We have geopolitical issues facing us in the Middle East. But inside, in India, to anyone, we all know that demand is slipping, business sentiment is grim, growth is falling. So in an environment like this, to have a conclave, a chamber of conclave, actually focus on an issue that does not necessarily lend itself to managing the short-term challenges that you face, I think is very commendable. And to that extent, I really do feel that you have hit the right topic. And the reason I say it's commendable and it's the right topic is because sustainability is indeed going to be the crucial imperative for meeting a company's competitive challenges. You cannot afford to ignore the challenge of sustainability. The world is one where no business can afford to now look at just its shareholder and say that its ecosystem is limited to meeting the demands of its shareholder. There is no way that we can say that there is a trade-off between profits and, let's say, principles, or profits and sustainability. Yes, without profits, I don't think any one of us can afford sustainability. But without principles, without the principles of sustainability, I just wonder whether any one of us deserves profits. That is the real issue here. So again, I say that you have rather addressed a very important issue. Sustainability is one of the key issues that are going to be, or the key pegs on which you're going to define your competitiveness. You know, philanthropy is it's a noble institution. I mean, Aristotle said, and let me just try and pick up the quote that I have here, which is, now my machine has gone dead. And he said that to give away money is an easy matter and in any man's power. But to decide what to give and how large and when and for what purpose and how is neither in every man's power nor an easy matter. That was Aristotle way back in the classical era. Indian business, you might say, have been philanthropic, but for a long, long while, Indian business have been philanthropic in a very narrow sense. And most businessmen, I suspect, in the privacy of their offices, in the privacy maybe even of their boardrooms, where there are no outsiders really prying into what the internal sort of conversations are all about, have felt, like Friedman, like Milton Friedman, that the business of business is business. That business have a singular responsibility to their shareholders, and that they really shouldn't be asked to extend that responsibility to do what the government is supposed to do, which is to meet the social, which is to, in effect, respond to social issues. But that, I think, that attitude, I believe, in my experience over the last 20 years with business, has changed now. I believe it's changed. I see it on the boards that I sit on. Mahindra is a great example of a company where there's no doubt that for 20, 25 years, it has always believed that its responsibility goes well beyond the domain of its shareholders. I'm the chairman of the L&T CSR committee, and its focus as a theme is meeting India's social infrastructure. That is its theme, and it's focused very much on water, sanitation, education, and skill development. The point I'm making is there are businesses that have realized that we're not philanthropic just because the government has asked us to be philanthropic. Now, unfortunately, in my view, the government's CSR policy has actually muddied the waters somewhat, because it has, in a sense, suggested to business that they are not to be trusted. It's not just the fact that they've mandated that 2% of the businesses, profits should be allocated to CSR. It is also the latest amendments that have just been made, where you've almost suggested that people who do not meet this financial obligation should be criminally charged. Now, this is coming at a time, by the way, this amendment comes at a time where CSR spend has gone from 6,000 crores in 2014 to 12,000 crores last year. It isn't as if business has let government down. It is business is actually is delivering on its responsibility, and yet the government now imposes this particular clause. So this whole issue of what is the requirement of business is one that I feel has got a bit cluttered. And I don't blame business at times to say, if this is the attitude of government, that where they see us, in effect, as no more, no less, as a vehicle to bridge their public deficit, rather than as a partner in their social development, then our commitment to CSR is going to be also, in some senses, weakened. I'm saying that only because I feel that we are at that stage now where we have, as businessmen, we have to go beyond government. We have to ask ourselves the question, as I said earlier, do we really believe that it is a business imperative to be socially conscious? And if so, why? Why is sustainability, why should sustainability be an imperative part of our management systems? Now, here, I think it's important to make sure that we understand what we mean by sustainability and differentiate sustainability from the concept of CSR. CSR, as I see it, let me put it this way, the big differentiator between CSR and sustainability is time. CSR focuses on defined projects, it focuses on identified beneficiaries, and there is a target. Sustainability, as was defined by the UN 25 years ago, is about meeting the needs of the present without compromising the interests of those who are yet unborn, without compromising the interests of the future. Sustainability is about balance. Sustainability is about ensuring that we are able to move forward in a way that meets the interests or takes into account the needs of both the planet, the environment, society, people, and, of course, our own individual separate interest, which in the case of business is profits. It's a matter of balancing people, planets, and profits. But that is a long-term objective. You cannot achieve your sustainable goals by just focusing on the short term. And that is the big difference between CSR and sustainability. And I put it to you that in the conversations you have, you must not ignore this factor of time. Otherwise, you will talk about CSR when you're in fact referring to a project that's going to be like Dunny Kelly, a 25-year-old, 50-year-old project, which is truly sustainable. Or you'll talk about sustainability, but in fact say, let's build a school in these 5 districts, and having built that school, that'll be the end of the game for us, or the end of our particular objective. That's not sustainable. That's maybe meeting a particular defined social need for a particular set of beneficiaries. So let's be clear about definitions. And I'm saying that to you because it is important that we actually now, in today's world, ensure that we are clear about what indeed is going to be our objective. Now, let me ask the question then, how should companies respond to this imperative of sustainability? What should companies do? I think the first thing to do is integrate sustainability into your management system. I repeat, it's not integrate CSR into your management systems. It's integrate sustainability into your management systems. CSR is well integrated into your management system. We all have CSR committees. It's a group, it's a board mandate, it's a Companies Act mandated requirement. But I would say to the board directors responsible for CSR, I would say the management responsible for CSR, go back and redefine what you mean by CSR and understand what the distinction is between CSR and sustainability. So, and by redefining, you actually then begin to integrate it formally into your management systems. I think the second thing that we have to do is really review our financial metrics. Today, people like Partha will look at the risks and the returns of a project. Yeah? I'm saying that they need to look at risks, returns, and impact. There are 3 criteria here that you need to take into account. You don't look at the project just on the basis of what's the risk or what's the return. You also ask yourself the question, what is the impact that you're going to have on society, on the environment, and of course, the risk and return is going to be what's the impact you have on your bottom line. Now, all of us have actually heard of the triple bottom line sort of parameter, whereby you look at environment, society, and economics as the basis for defining what projects should go ahead and what shouldn't go ahead. But you will all, I think, agree that this triple line parameter has been used to reject projects. These parameters are used to actually look at projects through the lens of these 3 triple sort of this triple line parameter and say this project does not meet these criteria and therefore it should be rejected. But you don't actually direct capital explicitly towards projects, towards enterprises that have an impact. So I am suggesting now that you need to actually ask yourself a further question. You don't need a lens for rejecting projects. You need a lens for actually redirecting capital. And that lens that I'm talking about is one that will look at impact as a driver of capital. You actually identify projects that have a positive impact, but also, of course, meet your threshold criteria of profitability. That's what I mean by risk, return, and impact. So that's the second thing I would say and how you integrate sustainability or how you respond to the imperative of sustainability. The third thing I would suggest is that we have got to be, as companies, to respond to issues in a very focused way. And here I'm talking about geography and I'm talking about social issues. You can't do everything. You can't cover India, and you can't certainly have an impact if you endeavor to cover all of India, or indeed address every single issue that we are confronting in this country. So you need to actually have a much more focused approach, and that focused approach must go beyond simply meeting your monetary targets. It is an approach that is looking always towards creating and delivering sustainable solutions. And in order to deliver sustainable solutions, I come to my last point, which is my fundamental point about collaboration. Now, Partha talked about collaboration, and he, in fact, referred to a conversation that we had in, I think, the CSR meeting. And I am now firmly of the view that we corporates cannot address the issue of sustainable solutions on our own. Nanikali is a great example of how one corporate has actually delivered education for the girl child. But if it wants to really expand that and deliver it on a sustainable basis across a larger geography, it will perhaps need to collaborate with companies, not just for financials, but also for leveraging their non-financial assets. Now here I have, for instance, let me explain what I have in mind. For instance, I have in mind, consider, let's say, a JV, a joint venture, between Reliance Jio, TCS, Unilever, and Larsen & Toubro. And this JV is focused on improving the quality of education in a particular geography. Now, and this, of course, JV is doing this in partnership with the local community. Now, this JV is not just going to be able to provide the hardware of a school building or tables and chairs, but it will also be able to provide internet connectivity by Jio. It will also be able to provide IT by Wipro. Unilever will be able to bring its marketing skills. And, of course, a company like, say, Larsen & Toubro can introduce vocational training. The combined impact of this approach, this multi-pronged approach, is one way of bringing or creating sustainable income-generating opportunities for the villagers. It is not just going to be a school that is hardware, which has got the hardware, which is what, say, Larsen & Toubro can do, or a school which is a smart school, which perhaps Wipro could provide. It's a school where you actually are looking at the hard solutions, the soft solutions, and also looking forward and saying, how do we actually provide skills that can be marketable in a larger context? Now, I think that this collaborative effort, this sort of collaborative, which is what I think sort of Sheetal was talking about, and also Partha, I think this is something that we really need to talk about more seriously. And here we shouldn't talk about financials. We shouldn't be saying that let companies come together and pool all their financial assets together. We really need to create a consortium, a development model, a sustainable development model, where we are seeking to bring together the complementary assets of different companies. And we choose, and say Bombay Chamber of Commerce actually identifies 4 or 5 such consortia, where each consortia comprises of members of companies that are complementary in their skills, that they have complementary skills, and that each of them then addresses a particular social issue. And they commit to that social issue for a sustainable period of time, and they commit to creating a sustainable solution. So I think that collaboration is, in fact, the the one way in which business today can not only just actually make an impact on our society, but it can also address this trust deficit that seems to exist between government and business. The trust deficit that has compelled them to actually introduce this amendment. We are not trying to say, or rather business should not be saying that we will do your job. We cannot do the job of government. But we can say to government that we are ready to now contribute. And we have always been ready to contribute towards social issues. And I'm thinking that this is one way of addressing it. Rather than doing it as a singular entity, you do it through these joint venture consortia, and certainly the chambers of commerce like yours, Partha, can provide the fora for creating such consortia. So let me just conclude, if I may have. I think that, as I said, there is no trade-off, in my view, between what are the imperatives of business and in the short term and what are the imperatives of business for the long term. Social capital is a key ingredient for competitiveness, and it cannot be ignored. If you ignore it at your peril. Your reputation, business reputation, and also your competitiveness would be compromised if you were to ignore the challenge of society. No business can survive if the society around you fails. And I would urge you, therefore, not to just treat the word CSR or sustainability or philanthropy as another word. I'd urge you to actually make sure that each of your organizations believes in the importance of this issue because it is a business imperative. As individuals, each one of you will be philanthropic and will perhaps have your own individual interest in philanthropy. As a business, sometimes it becomes very difficult to argue on behalf of philanthropy unless you can actually appreciate that business is part of society and society is an essential ingredient for business success. And I think you have to have the conviction, the social conviction, that sustainability is indeed an imperative for successful business. And if you have that corporate value, and if you can embed that conviction amongst your colleagues, I think you would have placed yourself on a very solid foundation to meet the challenges that you're going to face in the coming years. Thank you very much.